Hey guys, what's up? It's Finch here, and today we're back with another top 10 video. Today we're going to be going over the top 10 overused Pokemon of all time. So we're going to be discussing generations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 overused. So every single generation. So if Pokemon was good in generation 1 OU, it's going to count just as much if Pokemon was good in generation 8 OU. Of course, there's some different factors that we're being discussing. For example, the longevity of how great some Pokemon are. Some Pokemon were really good in one generation, but then no other generations. So those Pokemon might not get as much credit as Pokemon that were good over, say, 3 or 4 generations. On the other hand, some Pokemon were great Pokemon over every generation, but they were banned to Uber in certain generations. And that will also be held against them here because they were in OU. So we're completely looking at the best Pokemon in overused, the Pokemon that have gone the longest way towards shaping every generation of overused collectively. Another thing is some Pokemon were only released in generation 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. Pokemon that were only in so many generations can only make so big of an impact. For example, we're going to be discussing some Pokemon that are going to be lower on the list or in the honorable mention section that might be considered top tier Pokemon in almost every generation they're in or every generation they're in, but those Pokemon are going to be lower on the list just because they didn't have the chance to impact as many generations as others. Therefore, Pokemon that have been around since generations 1, 2, 3 are more likely to find their way further to the top of the list than they would towards the bottom of the list, and vice versa. Pokemon that are more recent are more likely to be up there and not even qualifying on this list. So, now that I have those little notes out of the way, I also want to say that this is also just my opinion. People are entitled to have different opinions about what is good and what is not good. In addition, people are entitled to have different opinions about how much weight a certain tier or a certain time period of success might hold. Personally, I've only been playing the game at a very high level competitively since the middle of Generation 5 or maybe even the start of Generation 6, but my competency spans throughout all generations besides 2. Really, in terms of overuse, I feel comfortable playing Generations 1, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 OU, and at least I'm familiar enough with Generation 2 overuse. But also, I did look at some resources before compiling this video. The Smogon Forum's viability rankings for every single generation are amazing, and also Pokemon Perfect has some tools as well. In addition to this, I've scoured over tournament replays for the last number of years, following the highest of high tournaments such as SPL, Smogon Classic, World Cup Pokemon, etc. So not only have I been familiar with the main generation of OU since Generation 5 when I started, but also I have an opportunity to dabble as a spectator and player in older generations as well, which has given me a large frame of reference. Of course, there are people that are more qualified to make lists like these than me. For instance, people that have made it very far, if not one Smogon Classic. I'm sure all of them have amazing input on Generations 1 through 5, and while I have pretty good input on Generations 5 and perhaps 3 and 4, it's really not the same as people like those. And in addition to that, people who have won tours like Smogon Tour have just, unmatched levels of competency in the newer generations. And while I've been very familiar with them, again, there are people overall that are more qualified, and then there's guys like BKC who just, basically a living, breathing Pokemon encyclopedia. You ask him something and he's just going to have an amazing, detailed answer. And because of that, I will say that this might not be the single best reference for this of all time, but I did put a lot of time thinking this tonight, and on top of that, I thought it'd be a really cool topic to present to you guys. So without further ado, we're going to get into my top 10 list of the best overused Pokemon of all time, including every generation. First off, we're going to start with some honorable mentions, 4 of them in fact, 4 Pokemon, and they have very, very, very different backgrounds. In fact, only 2 of them are remotely similar, and those 2 are going to be Excadrill and Landorus T. So we'll discuss them first, as they're probably 14 and 13 in my eyes. So the thing is that Excadrill and Landorus T both were introduced in Generation 5. In fact, Excadrill was banned in Generation 5 for a long time, and Landorus T was only introduced midway through Generation 5. So both these Pokemon have had less than 3 full generations under their belt, especially considering the fact that Landorus T is not even in Generation 8 yet. So therefore, it's a limited time span that is really working against them. The thing is that in Generations 5, 6, 7, and 8, Excadrill is considered a top 15 to 20 Pokemon in all of them, and on top of that, in Generations 8 and in Generations 5, it's probably a top 5 to 7 Pokemon in both of them, whereas in Generation 6, it's definitely within the top 10 as well. So Excadrill has an amazing slew of things going for it. For one, it's the original Sand Rush abuser. It is great on sand teams, and it also just does so much. But also, ever since fairies were introduced in Generation 6, it's also one of the original fairy killers with Iron Head and the Steel typing. It's amazing. And finally, the typing of the ground and steel type is just amazing defensively, which enables it to get the most out of it offensively, and abilities like Mold Breaker and also Sand Force that, of course, can work very well in Generations 5, 6, 7, and 8. I mean, honestly, Mold Breaker works every generation, and Sand Force works really well in Generation 5 right now, so all 3 abilities are super practical, even if Sand Rush is probably the default right now on sand teams, and Mold Breaker is the default otherwise. All 3 are very practical, and has amazing offensive presence on the physical side, and you you can invest a lot in the special defense and make it very tanky on the special end as well due to very high base HP. So investment goes a long way into the defense stat itself, and it's not the slowest Pokemon, especially if you provide sand, then it becomes very quick. So the mole is definitely not something to mess with, and if that's not enough for you, then it also has access to great utility moves such as Stealth Rock and Rapid Spin. So yeah, as for Landorus T, it's a bit of a different beast. It's, again, a physically offensive ground type. However, Landorus T, and again, we're not grouping Landorus I here, as Landorus I has actually been banned from OU the last couple of generations due to Share Force just being ridiculous. But Landorus T itself has been a physically defensive behemoth over the last couple of generations when it was allowed. Last generation, it perhaps shined brightest on the offensive end of the spectrum due to Z-moves being released and it being one of the primary Z-move users. In fact, for a year or two, there was a campaign to get Landorus T banned for OU. Ultimately, he just resided as one of the top 3 to 5 Pokemon in the tier throughout the long span of SMOU, and it's even worse in Warax or XYOU actually, because people only tend to run the Choice Scarf set, and while that set is fine and well, it faces stiff competition from other ground types such as the aforementioned Excadrill and Gliscor, both of which are probably in a better position than right now. However, if you go back to Black and White overused, then you'll notice that Landorus T is one of the top dogs. In fact, while it was just the best Scarfer for a long time, now it's using leftovers in other sets as well, setting up Stealth Rocks and doing all sorts of things. It even has breaker-oriented sets such as the Swords Dance plus Fighting Gem set, and it can run Rock Polish sets too. It just works amazingly, and honestly, a lot of top players use it anywhere from 30 to 50% of the time, so it should not be shocking that Landorus T is able to kind of overcome the fact that it's held back by the last couple of generations, being only generations in, due to how outright effective it has been over the generations it has been. However, there are 2 Pokemon that have been around for a bit longer. In fact, Gengar, the Pokemon I'm going to actually kind of put at number 11, has been around all the way since Generation 1, but Rotom Wash is a bit of a different case. It's been around since Generation 4. Now, for what it's worth, all Rotom appliances, besides the default Rotom form, were Ghost type in Generation 4. And Rotom Wash was one of the more common ones. I'm just grouping them all together for this purpose. Rotom appliance forms are really good in the DPPOU tier. They're among the top 5 or so Pokemon. I mean, use Scarf sets are really great on offense. It can Trick as well, so if work and balance even. And then on Breast Talk, on Stolly or both your teams can work well too. We've seen sets like Sub-Split or Sub-Plus Charge Beam as well. Even Specs has some viability. Overall, it's just a really great Pokemon in DPP. However, once the forms changed type and they became more unique Pokemon, Rotom Wash became a standout great OU Pokemon for Generations 5, 6, and 7. In Generation 5, it's undoubtedly a top 10 Pokemon. It's an amazing pivot with the 12.5% burns it could get from Will-O-Wisp, coupled with the fact that there's no defog or regenerator, so it's just going to be great at helping force damage on bulky offense and balance teams. Overall, Rotom Wash is one of the best momentum generators and just catalysts to progress in Generation 5, and I absolutely love this Pokemon. Perhaps I'm a bit biased, because I think a lot of people wouldn't include this on their list, but personally I would. I just think Rotom Wash is an amazing, unmatched presence in OU over a couple generations, and much stays the same in Generation 7, while it does face more difficulties, such as Pokemon like Clefable being able to wall it. It also still has a good place in the metagame, and does well against a number of Pokemon such as Sandorus Excadrill, Gliscor, Mega Metagross, etc. And in Generation 7, it actually was able to use some Z-move sets and defog, so it expanded its niche a little bit. Unfortunately, it was a bit worse as a pivot, and burn got reduced to 6.25%. But with that said, Rotom Wash was still considered an A to A- tier threat in the SMOU metagame. This generation, unfortunately, has fallen off quite a bit due to heavy duty boots making Rotom Heat the superior form, and Rotom Wash has actually been residing more as a UU Pokemon. And it's going to be interesting to see if it ever rises back up to OU. Personally, I think one day it will, but I don't know for how long, and I don't think it'll ever reach the high highs it has previously. And because of that, and the fact that it wasn't around in Generations 1, 2, and 3, it's hard to say, oh wow, Rotom Wash is like a clear-cut top 10 Pokemon, but I think it's closer than a lot of people give it credit for. However, a Pokemon that I think a lot of people would include in their top 10, and perhaps I might be snubbing, is Gengar. Gengar is a Pokemon that has been OU in Generations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I want to say 6 as well, but it then fell to UU last generation, Generation 7, and now it's back in OU this generation, I believe. Actually, it had a stint in OU, and now I think it might be UU. I think it dropped to UU at some point. I don't know where it is right now. It's either OU or UU, but regardless of that, it's been one of the longest tenured OU Pokemon out there, without a doubt, and it's been making a lot of impact in the older generation tiers as well. In Generation 1, it's a bit more of a niche pick nowadays, but it has solid viability as a lead. It has a weaker explosion, but it can still do that, and it has Absolute Hypnosis and some nice coverage, as well as Nightshade, which does hit normal types in Generation 1. In Generation 2, it's a great spin blocker and utility. It's able to explode, thief things, and then acquire their leftovers, Bolt Beam coverage, keep from Fire Punch for things like Steelix and Fortress, Dynamic Punch for Tyranitar and Snorlax, etc. Hypnosis, yeah, you name it. It's just really good on these kind of new era bulky offensive teams, and it's been good historically as well. Unfortunately, it does face some stiff competition because you can only fit so much offense on the GSC teams. A lot of teams actually are running more and more offensive, but of course you still have like a Restock user on every team, be it Raikou, Snorlax, Zapdos, etc. And on top of that, a lot of teams are fitting spikes with Fortress, Cloyster. Snorlax is on every team. You always want to have at least an electric type, be it Raikou or Zapdos, etc. And then, of course, there are other like offensive Pokemon such as Nidoking, Tyranitar, although Tyranitar serves a great defensive purpose in checking Fire Locks, and on top of that being a Pursuit Trapper. So yeah, I mean, it's not going to be used as much as it would be in, say, I don't know, ADV, which is the next year it's in, but it's still a great Pokemon in GSC. But yeah, ADV Gengar is probably where it peaked in terms of OU viability. It was just a great Pokemon metagame. It's even seen better days than now, but regardless of that, it was really good at blocking Fortress spins and taking advantage of spikes and sand, just helping wear things down late game due to amazing speed tier. Kind of one of the original forms of like soft speed control as well. And of course, Explosion was good. And then in Generation 4, it started to fall off a little bit, but it was still a very solid OU Pokemon, to the point that a lot of people just loved using it as a Focus Blast, Shadow Ball, as a physical special split, helped it a ton there. And then it can run like Sub Split or Wisp, Taunt, Hidden Power, Explosion, etc. Didn't really run Choice Sets because Choice Ghosts that aren't Rotom in a Tyranitar metagame seemed rough. But with that said, Gengar was still a nuke. It did really well against bulky teams, and it was hard to switch into reliably, so while it was limited, it definitely had its effectiveness. Unfortunately, Generation 5 began to see the demise of Gengar as an OU Pokemon due to the fact that Chople Tyranitar and other overwhelming threats were very common in the metagame, but it still stayed OU throughout the entire generation, and in Generation 6, it really saw even more sporadic usage, but again, mostly an OU Pokemon. Generation 7 is, however, a very weird tale of Gengar viability that I definitely want to get into here. So at the start of Generation 7, when like Pheromosa was running around, all the goons were running around, you name it, Zygarde, Pheromosa, Genesect, etc. Everything was out and about. Gengar was actually like top tier. Shadow Ball was just borderline unresisted. Specs and Scarf Gengar were both great. In fact, ABR came up with Specs Gengar in SPL game week 2 of, I believe, SPL, I want to say 8. He came up with Specs Gengar against CL and won with that, and then it just rose to amazing popularity. That SPL, Gengar just saw so much usage, and then it translated to the ladder as well, but eventually it did die down, just as people started running a lot more Pursuit, Ghost Resist became more common, Assault Vest pivots grew out more and more common, such as Magearna, and even Tangrowth, which could stop Shadow Balls easily. And Gengar's effectiveness was definitely limited, to the point that it never really saw consistent usage again, and eventually dropped to UU. So yeah, it was definitely a bit more of a hype flavor of the month or flavor of the season type Pokemon, but it definitely had its moment in the spotlight in SMOU, and now in SSOU, it actually saw a lot of usage early on as a potent ghost type with Choice Specs, and nowadays Nasty Plot with Life Orb is still great. There was a period where Sub Hex was good as well. Even saw sometimes a Scarf set. So yeah, Gengar had some viability this generation. It definitely saw better days. In fact, there was a point in time when I definitely would say it was a top 15-20 Pokemon, but now it's fallen off still, just because other ghost types like Dragapult take up more usage, and there's a lot of dark types going around, such as Mandibuzz. So you really are limited to a Nasty Plot set, and it can't do a ton. So I believe it fell to UU at some point. I'm not sure if it rebended back up or where it is now, but yeah, Gengar, again, a great Pokemon overall, but perhaps not one of the top 10 best of all time, just because it's never truly seen a super dominant generation like all of the top 10 have seen. Besides number 10, which in my opinion is very fringe and on par with Gengar in some ways, but just a tad better, and that is Alakazam. Just to compare it to a bit, Alakazam was closer to staple status in Generation 1, being a very common lead in 6 Pokemon as well. A lot of teams just ran like 3 Psychics and 3 normal types or stuff like that, with Zapdos or one of the rock types like Rhydon or Golem being thrown in the mix as well. In Generation 2, it didn't see as much usage as Gengar. Same with Generation 3 and 4. In fact, in Generation 4, it fell all the way down to UU. I believe in Generation 3, it's a very fringe pick as well. However, Generation 5 is when the tables turned. It got access to Magic Guard, and all of a sudden, Alakazam went from like an RUBL or UU option, which was still good because it was fast and strong, to a premier OU Pokemon with the Focus Sash and Magic Guard to just destroy teams late game, especially with the support of Sand and Spikes. And in Generation 6, to make matters even better for our beloved Alakazam, it gained access to a Mega Evolution, which over time became very, very good in the metagame. But during the generation itself, Life Orb Alakazam, piloted by guys like ABR and BKC, who love these balance teams with like Hippowdon, Spikes, Alakazam, was just a complete wrecking ball. It was able to outrun things like Scarf Tyranitar and just slaughter things like Clefable, Slowbro Cores with the Psychic plus Shadow Ball combination, with, of course, Focus Blast Steel types and Dark types such as Ferrothorn, Heatran, and Tyranitar respectively. So yeah, that definitely came into play. But then the Mega Evolution over time grew more and more into a popular pick. In fact, nowadays it's one of the top 3 to 5 Mega Evolutions in the tier, in my opinion, and that helps solidify Alakazam as just a great Pokemon overall in Generation 6. And in Generation 7, Malaga Alakazam continued to go and just improve over time, being such a fast Mega Evolution, outrunning things like Tapu Koko, Tornado Starion, and Greninja. Even Ash Greninja was just a complete godsend for it, and being able to revenge kill all those Pokemon with strong moves like Psychic, Focus Blast, Hidden Power Ice, and the ability to recover and trace things like Toxapex or Tangrowth or Amoonguss' Regenerator just went a long way. Overall, Alakazam was a super practical Pokemon in the metagame, and it definitely saw a lot of high highs in SMOU. As for SS, it only came out recently with DLC coming out, DLC 1 Isle of Armor. However, it has stayed OU throughout its time, and it's definitely a great Pokemon with nasty plot 3 attacks, being able to break a lot of bulky cores. So, yeah, Alakazam is considered one of the top, 10 or so offensive Pokemon, and probably like 20 to 25 Pokemon overall in the metagame, and because of that, it definitely deserves to be on this list. I just feel like it aged over time a lot better than Gengar, whereas Gengar started off better in the first couple of generations. Alakazam has been far and away better in all of the more recent generations, with more sticking power and just more overall viability, mainly thanks to the ability that it got in Magikarp and the fact that it got a Mega Evolution, which was a godsend for it as well. So yeah, I have Alakazam coming in at number 10, and perhaps my number 9 Pokemon might not resonate as much with you guys. In fact, I didn't even include it at number 10 mainly because I was worried that me starting with this Pokemon would turn you guys off such a Stalia list, but I promise you guys it's one of the few Stalia Pokemon on my list. In fact, one of 2 or 3 Stalia Pokemon on my list overall, and that is Chansey. And Chansey honestly is kind of tied with Alakazam in my eyes, in that Chansey is kind of awkward. It saw some generations where it fell off because Blissey was better in generations 2, 3, and 4, all of which Blissey saw some usage in. Generation 3 in particular is considered one of the staples of the tier, whereas in Generations 2, it was more of a stall Pokemon that didn't see a ton of usage in Generation 4. It definitely saw more in Generation 2, but it wasn't anything to brag about or come home and be like, oh my god, Blissey is ruining Gen 4, because it definitely was not. Generation 2, it initially was really good when Generation 4 was a thing because of Scarm Bliss cores, but eventually it saw itself fading until it was more of a stall Pokemon than anything else. But with that said, in Generation 3, it was a balanced lure of all things. So Chansey just wasn't around for the other 3 generations at all. However, in the generations where Chansey shined, i.e. Generation 1, when it was basically a staple, perhaps the 2nd or 3rd best Pokemon in the tier, Generation 5, 6, and 7 when it got Eviolite back, and now Generation 8, it has been great. And that viability alone is enough to put it on this top 10 list, in my opinion. Just to go through the generations where Chansey is usable, not Blissey. Because, again, if we can combine the two, Chansey and Blissey, then I'd say it end up being number 4 or 5 on this list, perhaps around Zapdos. Just showing how good it would be. But, unfortunately, oh, by the way, it's a little spoiler, Zapdos is ahead of this in the list, and perhaps in the middle of the pack. But, unfortunately, we can't combine the two. I don't like doing that. So, Chansey standalone is enough to crack my top 10, whereas Blissey is probably more in the 20 to 25 range. I'm not going to get into that in this video, but with that said, yeah, Chansey in Generation 1 was a staple. It was the OG special tank, and keep in mind, special was only one stat that generation, so it actually did respectable amounts with Ice Beam and Thunderbolt, but it could also run Seismic Toss to do damage. On top of that, it had great options such as Sing, which was actually very viable that generation on it, and Thunder Wave to deal status, as well as Counter to help negate physical attackers such as Tauros and Snorlax using Body Slam. So yeah, that went a long way there. Of course, though, Blissey took the upper hand of things during Generations 2, 3, and 4, just because no Eviolite means that Blissey just completely outclasses it. However, upon the discovery of Eviolite in Generation 5, Chansey became the top dog again. It stayed in OU throughout the generation. I believe it actually might have had a stint in UU where eventually it got banned, but yeah, it was OU viable, and it's still a staple on stall teams to this day. It's just the thing is that Generation 5 is so proactive, and without defog and with rapid spin blockers and all of the residual damage that you can find in a metagame, be it permanent sand or status just flying around 12.5% burns, etc. Stall was never that good, so Chansey never thrived in this generation. But in Generation 6 and 7, it was an amazing option, basically a staple on stall teams, and it walled so many things that were very challenging to wall otherwise. And it just wasn't super passive. With Seismic Toss plus Toxic or Thunder Wave went a long way in my eyes. You could also run things like Skill Swap to screw with the Magikarp users and Gliscor in both generations, which goes a long way. So yeah, all things considered, Chansey is an absolutely fantastic OU Pokemon over a solid 4 generations, and honestly, it's not as good this generation as Blissey due to heavy-duty boots, so we might see a departure over time. I see it getting into the top 15, top 20 range before going higher in this top 10 now, given that. But still, Chansey was a very deserving Pokemon overall, and it has a lot of generations where it sees significant clear OU usage, which is worth noting here as well. Moving forward, though, we have another Pokemon that perhaps is the best of the best in terms of the Pokemon that were released in Generations 4 or 5 that have been OU dominant since then, and that is Ferrothorn. Perhaps a bit controversial to include Generation 5 Pokemon in the top 10, especially this high up, as we've already had 2 Pokemon that have been around since Generation 1 ranked below it. But in my honest opinion, I think Ferrothorn is at number 8 in the top OU Pokemon of all time. That is because Ferrothorn has been just amazing in every generation since it was released. For example, in Generation 5, it is without a doubt a top 3 for Pokemon. It is just the best at setting up hazards. It's able to check Latios, Rotom Wash, Politoed, etc. It just does so many important things. And because of that, it's a staple. I mean, you see it on virtually every rain team. Like, I'd say 90 to 95% of rain teams have a Ferrothorn. The teams with Breloom plus Jirachi, A, struggle with Surf Latios, barring just Protect Spam, and B, also just are a lot less common right now than they once were. But also on sand teams, you see it on, at least a third, if not half of those as well. So yeah, I mean, Ferrothorn is just amazing. It's always going to be near the top of usage in Black-White. It does so much. It resists so much. Steel typing, especially in the pre-Dark Ghost neutrality era, was just amazing. And Ferrothorn rocked that like anything else. And it was the best spiker in a tier that is known for how effective spikes are due to the lack of defog. The kind of OG power creep / residual creep generation before it got kept in check by all of the implementations of Generation 6, 7, 8, etc. With that said, though, upon defog and the steel type being impacted negatively a little bit coming out in Generation 6, it didn't lose much. In fact, Ferrothorn is still considered a great Pokemon in that metagame. It's able to set up spikes, rocks, knock things off, Thunder Wave them, Power Whip, Gyro Ball, you name it, it can do it. It definitely is a really good Pokemon in Generation 6. It might not have ascended to the levels of greatness that it has in Generation 5. However, I still consider it a top 10 to 15 Pokemon there. Definitely in the 8 tier sort of realm. And Generation 7 was no different. Well, sometimes it was harder to use due to the fact that it wasn't able to check things like Zygarde in a metagame where Zygarde was allowed in FSM. That basically incentivized use of Tangrowth and Tapu Bulu for it. Overall, especially metagames before and after when Zygarde was super difficult to deal with, Ferrothorn was great and probably actually at a higher high right now than ever was before. I think Ferrothorn's a really underrated Pokemon. The main issue is that it's super susceptible to status like Burn from things like Toxapex, and Scald users and Will-O-Wisp users are all over the place. On top of that, Magnezone is really good in this generation, and Z-moves can potentially do a lot of damage to it, especially ones that are like swiftly geared to lure and steel types, which is pretty common, like all-out pummeling is all over the place. But with that said, Ferrothorn still is a great Pokemon in Generation 7, about as good, if not a little better than it was in Generation 6 in my eyes, and in Generation 8 it's even better than that. It still, again, has not reached Generation 5 fights, but this generation, Ferrothorn's great. It's been used as a rocker and spiker very often. It's good on balance teams. It can soft check things like, say, I don't know, Zeraora. Yeah, because close combat doesn't take it a physical defensive spread, and Excadrill, because body press is a godsend that it got this generation right. Yeah, body press is really cool, something that uses a lot on Ferrothorn. With Leech Seed plus Body Press, it's able to beat things like Mandibuzz and Corviknight, which are common defoggers, and also just destroys Excadrill, of course. So it's able to maintain hazards being set up in games, which is really cool on balance in both the offensive teams. And all things considered, Ferrothorn's just been one of the better Pokemon over a number of generations, and even a metagame-defining Pokemon in Generation 5, and arguably at points in Generation 6 and 8 as well. Moving forward, though, we have a Pokemon that, again, has been around all the way since Generation 1. In fact, another member of the Psychic types of Generation 1, and that is Starmie. One of the first Rapid Spin users as well in Generation 2 to really pick up usage alongside Cloyster and Fortress Golem eventually pick up usage, but that was well beyond the generation's time span. But that aside, Starmie has been great over the generations. It was, in fact, OU for a very long time, staying in OU in Generations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and initially during 6, but eventually I believe it fell to UU that generation, and then stayed in UU last generation, Generation 7 as well. And this generation, it's not really seeing much as well. So yeah, the invention of defog really hurt something like Starmie, which was relied upon as one of the primary hazard removers. And in addition to that, the prominence of Dark and Ghost types was a steel nerf hurt it, especially with Pursuit being as common as it was over the last 3 generations. But this generation, Pursuit's not there. It's just that there's so many better defoggers, and Starmie's poor defensively with how great Ghost and Dark types is that it's just not a good OU option. But, it still has some amazing feats in the first 5 generations. In particular, Generation 1, it was considered borderline staple status, basically kind of like A1, A2 with Alakazam as the big primary Psychic types. Generation 2, though, in Generation 3 and 4, Starmie maintained a lot of viability, whereas Alakazam fell off, and that's the main distinguisher in my eyes that I'm going to get to now. Basically, In Generation 2, Starmie was considered a really good rapid spinner and honestly anti-metagame pick. There are even sets with like Surf, Nightmare, Substitute, and Recover that don't use rapid spin that like take advantage of things being asleep, which I even used in Smogging Classic Playoffs and people like Fear have used as well. But yeah, Starmie is also a good offensive option. And then in Generation 3, it's perhaps even better than Generation 2. Not quite up to the Generation 1 levels of like dominance and borderline staple status, but it's a great anti-Skarmory rapid spinner, especially if you're running Recover sets as Toxic and Drill Peck can't completely destroy it. And on top of that, with the Hydro Pump plus Bolt Beam or Psychic coverage, it does really well offensively, just destroying things like physical offense and more bulky offensive teams as well, such as, say, the things you see Zamog uses like the Charizard, Balloon, Tyranitar, like Metagross, Snorlax type of builds, you know, Zapdos. Like, basically you have like a Pokemon like Zapdos or Snorlax that can like tank a hit or two, but in the long haul, late game Starmie is just completely devastating to those builds and physical offense as well. You basically rely a lot on your Snorlax, but it's taking Sand, plus potentially a Spike, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh crap. So yeah, offensive Starmie is a really like offensive pick in this generation, and Rapid Spin Starmie also is a godsend. All in all, I really love Starmie in Generation 3. I think it's one of the top, you know, handful or two handfuls of Pokemon, if you will. It's not like a world beater, it's not like a Tyranitar level or like a Skarmory level Pokemon, but it's definitely up there in my eyes in like the top couple, like one of the upper echelons of the tier, if you will. So yeah, Starmie shined bright in Generation 3, not as bright as Generation 1, but Generation 4, it also saw a lot of viability. In fact, in older variants of metagame, it's probably better than it is now, because nowadays we're just seeing teams kind of gravitate away from spinning and more being naturally built to prepare nicely for spikes. But still, there were years and years and years where Starmie was one of the better, if not best, Pokemon. In fact, at times it was S tier or A plus tier in the metagame. I'd say it's more like A tier right now, but still, again, Starmie has an amazing legacy in DPOU, perhaps better than that of ADVOU. Maybe not in the modern states of metagame, but definitely historically, it's even stronger in DPP. And then in Black White, it has some amazing high highs. It got access to Analytic, and it can abuse that on rain teams and just be completely devastating to switch into. Unfortunately, Pursuit Tyranitar, coupled with the fact that it just doesn't stack up well against things like Ferrothorn, made it so that its longevity in the metagame just isn't there in terms of longevity in the battle, and also it just isn't as good in the metagame right now, especially when compared to competition like Rain, Spinner, Tentacruel as well. But it still saw some very high highs. There were points when Starmie was considered a world beater, one of the better array of users in the tier, and that went a long way. Generation 6, it saw some periodic usage as a spinner. On bulky teams, there was this Cherim balancing that ABR built that had Spin Starmie in particular that saw a lot of usage in a couple tournaments, such as OLT, which was cool. But yeah, all in all, since then, it's really never seen much OU usage. But given how great it was in the first 5 generations, especially 1 and 3/4, it really was one of the best OU Pokemon. I think you could even argue to put it over at number 7, and it's definitely within your top, 8 or so Pokemon. Number 7, however, actually, wait, is this number 7? 10, 9, 8, 7. Yeah, I think you could argue to put it over number 6, honestly, but number 6 is a Pokemon that hasn't been around for as long, but ever since then, it's been making a gigantic impact, and that is Heatran. Heatran is a phenomenal OU Pokemon in Generations 4, 5, 6, 7, and I guarantee it'll be good in Generation 8, considering like the Cryostrap about Clefable and Magearna and Toxapex, which is Magma Storm, and oh yeah, Volcarona as well. It just is needed this generation. But that aside, my personal wish list for DLC 2 aside, and let me know if you want to see videos on DLC 2 when that comes out, because I will definitely be looking into that in November. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. Heatran is a phenomenal Pokemon. Generation 4, it was perhaps one of the top dogs as well. Specs, in my eyes, is one of the really cool sets, but also especially defensive sets, Scarf, Magma Storm sets, Berry sets with Stealth Rock. There is so many things Heatran can do in this generation, and overall, it's a completely versatile and destructive beast on the special end of the spectrum, while it also serves a great defensive purpose as well. And while it is trapped by things like Dugtrio, which is increasingly common, and walled potentially by specially defensive Clefable if you don't have the right sets, such as like Magma Storm or Explosion or Specs, it still is just great. I love, 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 love Heatran. And I think that all in all, it is one of the better Pokemon in that metagame. Probably like top 3 to 6 Pokemon, I'd say, yeah. Generation 5 would definitely fall off a little bit due to the prominence of Rain and things like Poison Yellow Gliscor. However, over the years, Heatran's still been a really good Pokemon in metagame. It's able to be one of the few things that can handle Volcarona. It does great against Jirachi, which at one point in metagame was really, really popular. And it's able to check things like Psychic types. Again, it does not like hardcore beat. In fact, it does even 1v1 Latios, Alakazam, or Reuniclus, but like switch into moves at the right time and just do what it does, get rocks up, force some chip, protect scout, etc. It really comes in handy, especially considering how great it is against some steel types such as Ferrothorn, the aforementioned Jirachi, and just completely destroying things like Skarmory. And another really cool underrated part is that rain teams actually struggle to switch into Lava Plume plus Toxic Heatran if it gets any status. The invention of a Refresh Politoed by various players, I mean, I use it, but I'm not going to say I invented it, but over the last couple of years is something that deters Tran a bit, but still, Tran is a good option in Black-White, definitely really good. It seemed maybe better than it has to now, even our common special defensive Gliscor and Magikarp is, but still, Tran is just one of the better Pokemon in Black-White over the years and even now. Generation 6, it continued being great. It was one of the few checks to things like Clefable, specifically Taunt sets, able to shut down Combine Clefable, which went a long way. It also did well against Pokemon like Ferrothorn too, and it had a great slew of resistances. Generation 7, however, it saw higher highs due to the Magma Storm set, trapping things like Toxapex, working really well against things like Clefable, Magearna, Magnezone, resisting Kartana's stabs, forcing it to potentially protect if it's a choice set. And on top of that, being a steel type that's not trapped by the ever so common Magnezone in that tier, it goes a long way too. But what really helped it was Z moves. Z moves such as Z Fire, Z Ground, even Z Steel at one point actually surged through the tier, are all amazing on it, basically negating typical counters. For example, Z Steel destroys things like Mega Latios and Mega Alakazam and Garchomp. Z Fire is able to nuke things like Gliscor, and Z Ground was great for just destroying Toxic for damage on you and also doing good amounts of damage for things like Garchomp and Mega Alakazam too. It also is just a great lure for a whole bunch of other things as well. So yeah, I'm not going to go into like my whole essay on Heatran and SM, but it was one of the best Pokemon. There were points when even people thought the Z sets were broken, the Magma Storm was Z sets, and I can't really blame them. It was just that great in the metagame. I'm glad we didn't ban it because I don't think it is broken, but yeah, Tran was just one of the best Pokemon in that tier. Really cool seeing how much usage it got and how effective it was. So it's really no shock to me that it was just, you know, hanging around at number, I believe, 6 on our list. Yeah, and I mean, I think you could argue between it and Starmie. They do really different things in good different generations. Tran's kind of had the surgence over the generations it's been in, though. Every single generation Tran's been in, it's been great, whereas Starmie's fallen off in recent ones, which I think kind of plays because now they're like span of like success. For Starmie's Gen 1 through 5, her Tran's Gen 4 through 8. So it's like similar, well, 4 through 7, but it will be an 8, I promise. So it's similar lengths, and right now, maybe you give Starmie the length just because Tran's not in Gen 8. But at the same time, Tran's level of dominance in DPP and even in SM is nowhere, it's like only matched by Starmie and RBY. And RBY is a super limited metagame, so I kind of give it a little less weight than the others. And again, Generation 2, 3, 4, 5 Starmie, especially 3, 4, 5, is not something to like scoff at, but it's not as high as Tran was in DPP or in SM, and because of that, I think I kind of give my favor to Heatran in that little debate there that I just created for this channel, I guess. So let me know what you prefer in the comments of these two. Anyway, next up we have Clefable, a very infamous Pokemon, and perhaps something you guys are surprised to see this high on the list, but hear me out, guys. Ever since Clefable became a Fairy type, with Magikarp, it's just been ridiculous. Like, think about it. Clefable is absolutely amazing in Generation 6, 7, and 8. It is without a doubt a top 1 Pokemon in Generation 6 and a top 3 to 5 Pokemon in Generation 8. And it was a long period of time where it was a top 1 Pokemon and it wasn't even close in Generation 8. So this already, like the fact that it's been this good over this many generations is only matched by something like Tyranitar, which of course is in my top 4, don't worry. Now, the fact that it was complete dog shit in Generation 1, it was fringe viable as a Bloody Drummer in Generation 2, and it was never used in Generations 3 and 5, or something else, but also something that's really cool is that with the advent of Magikarp, it suddenly saw a huge uptick in usage in Generation 4, and now it's considered like an A+ tier Pokemon. It's one of the top 10 Pokemon or 12 Pokemon in Generation 4, for example. And that gives it some like longevity to its peak, some versatility, cool, because it isn't just relying completely on the Fairy typing. It was actually good as a normal type back then too, which is just amazing. It was a bit of a late surge, in fact. Arguably when it picked up a Generation 6 is when it picked up a Generation 4 at the same time, so kind of like belated DPPOU, if you will, but still, it was very good at that point, and because of that, in my opinion, sorry if there's a little vocal distortion there. I'm hoping that this audio is fine. I just had a little glitch in my computer, but that just, it proves how solid Clefable is, and I know it looks weird seeing it in the top 5, again, among things like Tran and Alakazam, and again, we'll see Zapdos in a second, as I said, but it is. That's the fact that matters. The class has been so dominant over the last 2 generations, and if it stays this way throughout Generation 8 and then Generation 9, it's without a doubt, in my eyes, moving above something like Zapdos, and it's basically the same thing as Snorlax, if not even better, because Snorlax was a stable tier in 2 tiers, but Clefable was close to that over 4. It's like, all of a sudden, you're like, oh crap. The OU GOAT Clefable? But nah, I don't think it's quite the GOAT. I think it's definitely top 5, though. I mean, just seeing how good it is, Even in Generation 7, it was clearly a top 10 to 15 Pokemon. It was great with Magikarp and the Fairy typing, but not to mention Generation 6, it's the best Pokemon, you cannot debate this. Generation 8 is one of the best Pokemon, and it was, for a majority of the generation, the best Pokemon, you cannot debate that. I mean, it was so adaptable just because Magikarp, phenomenal move pool, you name it. It's Extra Trick, Calm Mind, Stealth Rock, Knockoff, Wish, Soft Ball, now Teleport. He just keeps getting better and better and better. Clefable is clearly a top 5 Pokemon in my eyes. The bulky fairy with Magikarp just has everything you need on your bulky balance teams. I know it's not one of the fan favorites here, but it is definitely in the top 5 of my list. And I think it's kind of close to Zapdos at number 4, which is now my segue to it. Zapdos has been OU for a long time. Generation 1, it started out. It wasn't one of like the top 6 Pokemon, but it was right there in the neck of them. Teams basically always used the big 4 of like Exeggutor, Snorlax, Tauros, and Chansey. But then now a lot of people are dropping Exeggutor, and now it's kind of like the big 3 normal types plus the big 3 Psychic types with Exeggutor, Starmie, and Alakazam. I mean, generally teams try to at least have 4 of those, and then you can fit electric type like Zapdos or the less common Jolteon, and then a rock type like Rhydon or Golem, rock ground type. Yeah, one of those. It really just depends on your team. I mean, they're all viable Pokemon, all the ones I just listed, but you tend to always have Snorlax, Tauros, and Chansey on the teams, and then at least 2 Psychic types, or at least 1 Psychic type. So yeah, I mean, again, there's more flexibility. Our BYY team building is more nuanced than I could get into in this video, and I'm definitely not an experienced RBY team builder. I just built it for Classic, that's about it. But with that said, Zapdos is definitely a top 10 Pokemon. It's very viable and good in that metagame. And then in Generation 2, it just took off. Zapdos is the second best Pokemon in Generation 2 behind Pokemon at number 3 on our list, Snorlax, which, don't worry, this is not my segue, I'm just saying it's number 3 on my list. But it was just so good. Thunder was amazing. Basically was the reason why Raikou was used in the first place as another electric to check Zapdos, but also Zapdos had the ground immunity, which made it immune to spikes, also able to check things like Earthquake, Machamp that Raikou couldn't, especially because it had that fighting resistance, although Rocks had a plus 1 to get to it, but besides the point. And also the decently against Nidoqueen and Steelix, Golem, etc., forcing them to explode to kill it. I mean, yeah, Zapdos oftentimes is basically explosion bait, but in games where it isn't getting boomed into, it's doing a lot of damage with Thunder, paralyzing things, just living forever. Zapdos is a very good Pokemon in my eyes. And Generation 3, it didn't slow down a ton. It definitely wasn't as good as Generation 2, but it was still a premier Pokemon. It's just amazingly bulky with the ability pressure and just so strong with special attacks and Thunderbolt. It was one of the main reasons why things like Blissey picked up. And even things like Swampert can't check because it runs in Power Grass, Toxic Soft. And yeah, I mean, Zapdos is great in Generation 3. It slowed down a bit in Generation 4 because Stealth Rocks, but still, it was a great Pokemon, fitting on a ton of teams. It does mandate some support that's a bit dated. It's seen better days. But I guess you don't really need Rapid Spin on every single Zapdos team, just most of them. But yeah, Zapdos was great in Generation 4. Generation 5 is when it started to fall off. It became one of the best Pokemon in UU, but not so much in OU just because it was very overwhelmed. Things like Permanent Sand with Tyranitar being as good as it is, like that was there in Generation 3 and 4. I don't know why that's different here, but also just the power creep in general wasn't kind to it, and how common Stealth Rocks were up just staying for the entirety of games. And Pokemon like, say, Excadrill, Latios, Garchomp being there, Terrakion being there, just kind of the turrets being used was great, especially because rain teams could potentially shred it with rain-boosted Hydro Pumps, and it just didn't fit on those teams as much as, say, Thundurus. So, yeah, Zapdos definitely was not the best, but it's a very viable option still. As for options beyond Zapdos, in Generation 6, it actually saw Surgeon's usage as a defog user. It was really great against Tornadus T, Mega Scizor, Excadrill, etc. It was a really good option there. It rose back to OU, and it stayed in that place in Generation 7, where it also was good against Pokemon like Kartana as well. So yeah, Zapdos also had potential to use Z-moves, and Pressure was just great for opposing hazard setups like Ferrothorn. So again, Zapdos was pretty cool in the last 2 generations. It kind of bounced back nicely, and because of that, in my eyes, it was considered like a really good Pokemon in Generation 7, borderline 6, definitely Generations 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's just like really good. Like, it's solid. Honestly, it has a consistency that some Pokemon in the top 3 kind of lack, but the issue is that it's peaking those generations. The best it was never like a metagame defining Pokemon, if you will, like the top 3 were. It was close to it in GSC, but it was kind of outshadowed by number 3, Snorlax. It definitely was still like metagame defining, but it wasn't like, oh my god, it's the best Pokemon in the tier at any point, basically. And that was Snorlax, the best Pokemon in the tier in Generations 2 and arguably Generation 1. It should see at least 90% usage in RBY, and it should always, 100% of the time, period, no exceptions, be used in Generation number 2. And honestly, that alone, the fact it was that dominant, it was like more than Clefable was ever dominant in any generation ever. It basically owned 2 generations, guys, and I know Snorlax in Generation 7, 6, and 5 was completely unviable. Generation 4 it was a fringe but viable pick nonetheless. I know it has a lot of low lows. It's been a UU, even RU option in recent generations. So I think you're probably more likely to see this in number 4 or 5 on people's lists than top 3. But in my eyes, just because of how dominant it was in Generation 1 and 2, it does belong to be in the top 3 here, just barely by like the thread of its teeth. But nonetheless, it does. I mean, GSC Snorlax is the most dominant Pokemon of all time, and there's no debating that. It should be used on 100% of all serious teams. I mean, be it curse sets or boom sets or curse boom sets or rest talk sets or whatever the hell you want to do. Toxic Lax even viable. Mixed Lax, Physical Lax with Earthquake, whatever. You can do anything. It's always worth using in your teams. It serves an amazing defensive purpose and offensive purpose. It's one of the best catalysts of progress. It just defines that generation. And it's sort of similar in Generation 1. I mean, in a more simplified way. It uses Reflect. It can use Ice Beam, Earthquake, Body Slam, Hyper Beam, Self-Destruct, Rest. You name it, it can do it. Amnesia even. I mean, Surf, for fuck's sake. It's great. Snorlax is just one of the top dogs in Generation 1. It should be used in over 90% of the teams. It's one of the best 2 Pokemon. It, Tauros, Chance, it's probably best number 1 or 2, honestly. But yeah, Generation 1 or 2 Snorlax, unmatched. No other Pokemon has a 2-generation stretch like that. And I know, we all have a little recency bias. I'm trying not to show it in Elizabeth placing this as high as I am. Let me repeat that sentence. I like mumbled there. I'm trying not to show as much recency bias on this list, hence this being so high, but again, Snorlax just had an amazing peak, and I have to respect that. It probably could be number 4, 5, or 6, but honestly, nah, in my eyes, it's at number 3 for sure. Generation 3, it still was pretty great. It still is pretty decent. Seen better days there, but yeah, no, it was definitely a top 10 Pokemon at one point in time or another in that generation. Curse sets were still really good. It rivaled Blissey as like the special wall. Blissey obviously was more naturally bulky and had a recovery move that didn't require resting, but the thing with Snorlax that was cool was that it had more offensive output. It could boom. It was actually really good on physical offense with boom. On top of that, it could run curse sets. Again, it pairs well nicely with Magneton and Dugtrio as well. Little trap teams, or even just Magneton. So yeah, Snorlax is still really, really good in Gen 3. Then Gen 4 is when it started falling off. Gen 4 Snorlax just isn't great. It's kind of like a cool utility option. People use like custom sets. It has some nice things that it walls, like Special Jirachi, Heatran, Rotoms, but again, it was kind of like weak to every single form of residual damage, physical attackers, etc. So, time didn't treat it well. And then Gen 5, 6, and 7, you'll never ever see Snorlax in OU, but in Gen 8, it picked up again a little bit as a curse user, specifically in the mid-late, the pre-DLC metagame. Now you don't see it anymore at all, but Curse Snorlax was pretty good for a while. He was great against Cherim, Clefable, Rotom, Heat, Dragapult in the special end. Yeah, curse sets were great. So yeah, Snorlax definitely saw some good viability for a couple of weeks there. It's probably like a B tier, B+ tier Pokemon, but now it's fallen off again. But yeah, I mean, just amazing peaks in the first 2, even 3 generations of Snorlax. It's unmatched. Nothing has ever had a span like that. Even Tyranitar, which is going to be number 1 in this list, spoiler alert. And that just says a lot. That alone is enough for me to put it in the top 3. Feel free to say otherwise, but yeah, no, it is undoubtedly a phenomenal OU Pokemon over generations, as we're hitting the 45-minute mark, so geez, we're at 43 minutes. I've been rambling forever. So, next up, we have number 2, the Humble Steel Bird Skarmory, my World Cup team, US Northeast's mascot. A great Pokemon ever since Generation 2 when it came out. And the thing is that it was great in Generation 2, and then it was metagame defining Gen 3, really good Gen 4, really good Gen 5 at points, and at other points. Then Gen 6 and 7 started to fall off a little bit, same with Gen 8, but it still was OU through and through, besides this generation one. Now it's finally fallen to UU, I believe, which is just crazy. But, yeah, so the thing with Skarmory is that in Gen 2 it didn't even get spikes, but still was a great wall to things like non-Flamethrower / Thunder Snorlax. I mean, the list goes on. It was other things as well. I'm blanking here because I'm not a GSC player. It's like the one gen I don't play, but it was really good there. It was also good against like common Pokemon using Earthquake like Golem and Rhydon. It was able to switch in on Explosions, which was really cool. And it was able to beat any Curse Lax that didn't have a special move. Again, because you could run Curse on its own. Oh yeah, it was also great against Heracross. You got Yup. Toxic, Drill Peck, Rest, Sleep Talk, Whirlwind, Curse, as I said before. I think I've even seen Thief on it once or twice. Don't quote me on that though. But yeah, no, it was great in GSC. But when it really was like at its peak was ADV. ADV Skarmory is completely metagame defining. In fact, it's undoubtedly like number 2 or 3 in that metagame. Spikes is great. It even runs lure sets for Magneton with Hidden Power Ground here and there, which I find hilarious. Drill Peck, Toxic, Protect, Whirlwind, you name it. Skarmory is just great. One of the best Pokemon. It's really good against Pokemon as well, like Snorlax, physical Tyranitar, non like offensive Hydro Pump, Swampert, etc. It's able to get spikes up easily. So yeah, it's definitely like evolved over the years with the metagame too. Again, as we mentioned, with like people like Linear using the Hitpark Ground variant in SPL, and that just ran rampant through the metagame. It's obviously a bit cheesy pick, like counterpick the Magneton, but still, it is great. Then Gen 4, it's still a premier spiker. Same with Gen 5. Unfortunately, Ferrothorn, plus the fact that Rain teams were more common and Tentacle just destroyed it, made it a bit less effective, especially in the modern metagame. But over the years, Skarmory's been close to staple status in the metagame, and even nowadays, it's still very viable in metagame. So, would not sleep on Skarmory in Black-White OU. And then in Oros OU, it actually still retains some viability, similar to levels to Black-White nowadays, although previously Black-White Skarmory outclassed Oros Skarmory, but nowadays similar levels. It's kind of like an A-, maybe even A-tier Pokemon. Really good spiker for sure, and what great physical bulk to check things like Megalopony and even Mega Metagross, especially for lacking Thunder Punch. So yeah, Whirlwind, things like Non-Taunt Gliscor, etc. Generation 7 is starting to fall off. I mean, Magnezone just getting more and more common. Z-moves overpowering it. Other defoggers competing with it, and plus that making it spiking less and less effective. It still worked on some fringe balance install teams, but it was never great. And the same goes for this generation. It's not great. It faces even more competition with Corviknight, which leads me to believe that Skarmory is going to see rougher days before it sees better days, unfortunately. But it still is great. At least Magnezone's not as good right now because it's still hitting Power Fire, so it only traps a limited scope Pokemon, so that benefits those limited scope Pokemon because it's less common. But yeah, no, all things considered, Skarmory just is great all around. I mean, it's been good since Gen 2. It's one of the best OU Pokemon of all time, as I could say here. I mean, it's top 10 in Gen 2, 3, probably not 4 and 5, but it's definitely close. And then, it's still very, very viable in Gen 6, 7. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely great Pokemon. It does so much. It's like the OG Spiker in generations where you could set more than... Oh, God, excuse me. In more than one spike. Sorry, I have a long day, guys. Well, I guess we have to have one slip up in going to be a 50-minute video. But yeah, anyway, Skarmory is just amazing. Definitely try it out, guys, over generations. But number 1, a Pokemon we recently had a memorial for. Drumroll, please. Is Tyranitar. That was the most pathetic drumroll of all time, but it's fine. As always, when I mention Tyranitar in my videos, we do need a moment of silence. But with that said, while Tyranitar recently fell to UU for the first time ever, aka the first time in a very, 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 very long time, it still is the best OU Pokemon of all time. And I wanted to make this video actually just to remind you guys of how great it is to have Tyranitar as a GOAT. Upon being released in Generation 2, it was one of the better mixed attackers, pursuit trappers, fire, Snorlax checks, especially ran Roar, just all around threatening Pokemon. It can even run curse sets, Toxic, Dynamic Punch, Rock Slide, Earthquake, Fire Blaster, Flamethrower, Roar, Toxic, Curse, Rest, Sleep Talk, Pursuit, Crunch, you name it, it ran it. I mean, it was just that versatile. I even saw Thunderbolt on it sometimes here and there. I mean, yeah, Tyranitar was just that amazing. But if it's Generation 2 viability and versatility, being a top 10 Pokemon wasn't enough for you, let me tell you, Gen 3 Tyranitar was like, behind Gen 2 Snorlax, maybe the best Pokemon in any single generation of OU of all time, excluding RBY, because RBY is a super centralized tier where you have like 5 Pokemon that would be up in the top 10 there. But yeah, no, ADV Tyranitar is just simply put amazing. There's no getting around that. It was on 2/3 of team, still is. Permanent Sand is such an amazing catalyst. And Choice Band, Dragon Dance, Mixed, 4 attacks physical, Roar, whatever. I mean, I could list off 20 moves that could all be viably used in Tyranitar. I could go on and on and on. BKC probably has some videos on ADV Tyranitar on his channel if you want to check BKC out. He's amazing. Probably got like 7,000 subscribers right now. BKC's channel is super good with old gen stuff. But with that said, Tyranitar is just like GOAT tier in ADV, and DPP is a very little departure from that, whereas it's a bit more limited. It actually was able to run berries now, like type resistance berries, Choice Band, and now Choice Scarf was also really, really good for Tyranitar balance teams and even semi-stall teams as well. Yeah, I mean, DPP Tar is still like the best mod in that tier. Black-White is still, it's top 3, no matter how you look at it. Chople Tar is just amazing. Generation 6, Tar, Mega Tar came out, and it was still really good with the Mega Evolution. It wasn't as good, but Sand Teams are still great. It was a good Trapper with Scarf. Mega sets were decent. Dragon Dancer, Stealth Rock, again, more fringe, but still wasn't an A-tier Pokemon. Gen 7, it fell off a little bit more, maybe B+, A-, but still really good. Scarf sets fell off entirely, but Banded was great for stall. Dragon Dance Mega saw more usage, and Stealth Rock on the Mega sets were really solid as well. Just tanked everything and deal off ridiculous amounts of damage, trap things as well. So yeah, I mean, in generations 2 through 7 it's been great in, but in generations 3 through 5 it was completely and utterly metagame defining. Permanent Sand Generations and Permanent Sand Tyranitar is just unmatched. I mean, it's got an even more devastating span of dominance than Snorlax, perhaps. Just being a top tier Pokemon, just unmatched, paralleled. It's just that good. And all things considered, Tyranitar is the GOAT OU Pokemon. I can say this without a doubt. I think that Tyranitar and Skarmory have to be your top 2, no matter how you look at it. But you could argue Snorlax, just because it's fallen off so much, is you could say Clefable is above it, or even Zapdos is above it. But yeah, just to go through our top 10 in honorable mentions again, we got honorable mentions of Excadrill, Landorus T, Rotom Wash, Gengar. Number 10, we have Alakazam. Number 9, we have Chansey. 8, Ferrothorn. 7, Starmie. Just coming in at number 6, we got Heatran, the infamous Clefable at number 5. And then remaining in the top 5, we also have Zapdos at 4, Snorlax at 3, the aforementioned Skarmory at number 2, and the GOAT of all time overused. That's right, we have the GOAT, Tyranitar. Rest in peace, Tyranitar's OU stint. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you guys watched this entire 50-minute video, then let me know what your favorite Pokemon to use in OU of all time is. Doesn't have to be the best of all time. And if you guys want to comment your top 10 list below, your personal opinions, justification in the comments, I'll be sure to read all of them like I did with my favorite Pokemon video. And let me know anything else, of course. If you like more videos like these, definitely let me know in the comments below. And on top of commenting, again, anything you want in the comments, please. I love comments, guys. Also, be sure to like this video if you enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed the stuff put in my channel, subscribe, guys. Only 55 to 60% of you guys subscribe, so if I could get up to 5,000 soon, that'd be amazing. And I know you guys are watching. I see the views, so definitely be sure to subscribe. But anyway, have a fantastic day, guys. Thank you so much for watching and supporting our channel. And this is Finch. Peace out, guys. Bye-bye.